In America, culturally, it's not really popular to talk about money. You don't talk about money, you don't talk about politics at Thanksgiving dinner table. And also, people don't like to admit that they're suffering, that they're having a hard time paying their bills, that they're having a hard time with inflation. Hey, I'll admit it. I'm having a hard time with inflation. It sucks. It's not great. But a lot of Americans keep going on to get along. They go into debt, they use credit cards. But now Americans have involuntarily started skipping meals. It's like the Federal Reserve's intermittent fasting, involuntary intermittent fasting program, and they're doing this to afford their houses. So let's take a look at this article here from Market Watch, and then I wanted to specifically talk about the shoe that's going to drop this fall into summer, because we're dealing with this at a time as keep in mind, as people's lives contract, as the economy contracts. Because what is the Federal Reserve doing when they raise interest rates? They're making loans more expensive. Banks aren't lending out nearly as much. So the money supply is literally contracting. What does that mean? People lose jobs. Okay. So it says here 39% of Americans say they are skipping meals to make housing payments. So we're not even in the worst of it, folks. They're skipping meals to make housing payments. This means they probably bought a house that is too expensive, which I, to a certain extent, don't blame them because houses went to all-time highs in 2020 and 2021. With inflation still at levels not seen in years, many Americans are saying they are feeling financially stressed, and some are even saying they're skipping meals to stay afloat. A growing number of surveys are painting a picture of this era of financial challenge. One of the latest from Cleaver Real Estate Group showed that people's personal situation are the most cited stressors in their lives, their personal financial situation, rather. It's the economy, stupid. And again, people don't like to talk about it, but it makes them very angry. There's a phrase, we're 9 meals away from a revolution. People have to skip meals for 9 days. Or sorry, not 3 days, 9 meals. Ain't good. With 61% noting it as an issue, meaning financial stress. That put it above stressors of mental health, cited 57%, physical health, 53%, relationships, 48%. Cleaver Real Estate surveyed 1,000 U.S. adults. Now, why? Because it affects everything. Everything, right? If you're not financially secure or you don't feel financially secure, thinking about your future doesn't really matter. You're thinking about today. What happens when you don't think about your future? You don't get married, you don't have kids. It's this vicious cycle that has deleterious effects. Perhaps even more significant, 39% of Americans say they are skipping meals to afford their housing payments, according to Cleaver Real Estate Survey. And among millennials, that figure rose to 44%. Among baby boomers, it was 20%. There's another problem with millennials that I'll talk about in a second. Indeed, according to one report, housing prices have increased 160% since 2000. Meanwhile, wages have not always kept pace with inflation. How do you like inflation? How do you like the Federal Reserve? These people don't pay attention, which I guess they're going to realize here shortly that this is the point. Inflation is intentional. 2% inflation is intentional, and that's advertised, government advertised. They have to have inflation. Why? Because if they have deflation, government makes, drumroll please, less money. That's right, because they can't tax you. Inflation is quantified by the Consumer Price Index, currently stands at 6%, and in the Consumer Price Index, the way they've changed it multiple times, it's always in their favor. But who cares what they say? What is your inflation rate? Most people's inflation rate is anywhere from 15 to 25% in their life because they spend a lot of money on energy, groceries, and housing. So incidentally enough, energy and housing are left out of the CPI. So what is the problem with millennials specifically? I talked about this a while back, and it's changed. A lot of things have changed. Student loan debt. They have not had to pay on their student loans. Now, how much debt is there in student loans? They still don't have to pay until the end of summer or until the Supreme Court comes out with their ruling, based off if it's constitutional for taxpayers to foot the bill. Okay, so the outstanding federal loan balance on student loans is 1.635 trillion. That accounts for 93% of student loan debt. Why is it not held in private hands? Why is it held by the government? Because no one in their right mind would give a 17-year-old a $100,000 loan without it being federally guaranteed. And you can't bankrupt on it. Huge problem for the millennial generation because they're in massive amounts of debt. And they haven't had to pay on these loans for a long time. Still haven't had to pay on them. What happens when these millennials who are skipping meals, 44%, who are skipping meals, have to start paying on student loans again? What's going to happen to the economy? And to put that in perspective, 1.6 trillion is slightly above credit card debt in the United States. That may have changed recently because people are using their credit cards way more to finance inflation. But let's take a look at how many people are actually using forbearance. Introduced between the second and third financial quarter of 2020, the CARES Act offered student loan debt relief that affected an estimated 35 million borrowers. Between the third quarter of 2020 and the fourth quarter, financial quarters among the student debt repayment decreased 98%, while student forbearance increased 446%. So the number of loans in default also declined due to that forbearance. So 63.6 of all debt from the federal student loan remains in forbearance as of last year. So it's safe to assume this is December of last year. So it's safe to assume that it's still in forbearance, meaning they're not paying on their loans, and they won't until they're forced to in August, September of this year, or whenever the Supreme Court comes down with the ruling. That means 25.6 million or 58.9% of borrowers have loans in forbearance. And this is when the economy, the proverbial economy, hasn't hit the skids yet, right? There's signs, lots of bad ones, right? People, credit card debt's at all-time highs. People can't afford homes. People are losing their jobs. White-collar recession is happening already. We all, know the signs, know it's going to be bad. But another headwind to this generation of people who are trying to start a family, who are reaching that, mid-30s, early 40s, trying to start a family, is they still haven't even paid off their college loan debt, which is massive. And they haven't been paying on it for years. And knowing the trend in America, if you don't have to pay on a debt, that doesn't mean you save up for it. That just means you live higher on the hog and or just live that amount that you would have paid for college loans. It goes to paying for inflation. Government spending, folks. Everyone loves it. No one loves the consequences. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I think this is going to be big. It's going to be a big political issue because, it's not yet because they don't have to pay. They're still in la la land, pretend land. But all of a sudden, that $300, $500, $800 payment per month for non-productive debt, something they already have, non-collateralized debt, is going to come due again in August. Something they can't bankrupt on. Not good. All right, guys. Let me know what you think. Peace.